Filters. When it comes to filters, you have to think of how you're going to apply them, to whom. And that ends up being the data tables. I'm going to use some terminology that you might be familiar with. I'm not a business intelligence expert, but we're going to use some of those terms. Lookups, they're also known as dimensions, and the BI terminology. And fact tables usually end up amounting to transactions. How do these relate? Think of transactions being where all the action happens. This means our order details table that we've been using for quite some time now, that would be your transaction. Why? You have your product ID, the categories that end up being stored in there, and that relates to your orders, which contains the date that the order was processed. But all of your data goes mainly into your transaction table, or your fact table in this case. And that is related to your lookup tables, which ends up being your categories and your products. Now, these relate because filters are mostly applied to your lookup tables, and they drill down, flowing from your lookup down to your transaction. That is the idea behind of how filters work. That is the main reason your filters are best placed on your lookup tables. Just let's take a look at an example that I have here as how this applies. Imagine that your transactions table is, for our case, the order details table. And we have on top of that related two tables. Lookup table 1, lookup table 2. 1 or 2 could be either your products and your categories. Your filters would be applied to the top ones, and they would flow down towards your transaction table. That gives us an idea of how it would work within Power Pivot itself. That said, let's go ahead and do a quick demo to see how we can apply a filter, what type of filters we have available within Power Pivot. From our previous demo, we have the data already in place. Notice that we have the name of the product. We can go ahead and look for our category, which we scroll a little bit further up and we add it. Well, what can we do here? We can click on our Analyze and find that we have a few options that we can add in here. Where is the first place that we can look to add a filter? That's probably what you're wondering. And the answer is right in front of you, on the right in your pane. So there's a few ways you can approach that. You can drag and drop the category onto the filters. Notice that it already accommodates for you that area. What had just happened is that it added to the top of your screen the filter. Take a look and click and expand it. There they are, all of them. Given that this is not the most appeal-friendly look, but still you can choose multiple. You can unclick all and choose beverages, candy, and cereal. For some reason in my mind these are ringing a bell and seem appealing enough. Notice, they were all filtered in here. Now, what if we want to add more? We can pick and choose however we'd like. Once more, the data has been increased. What else can we do here? These filters are very useful, but what other choices do we have? Click here. Expand. You could move it to your row labels, to column labels, to values. You could even remove it. There you go. Once you remove it, everything is as if nothing had happened. That is just what you could do with filters. And there are many other uses that you can take advantage of. To those, you can relate to the Analyze ribbon tab and notice that there's slicers and timelines, which we'll take into a look at them also as well within time. Quick Explore. Quick Explore is really appearing automatically, and most likely you've already seen it during our demos before. Why? Because it's hovering automatically over our cells. Just like it does that automatically for you, that also means that you could easily click on it and be taken to Quick Explore on its own without being even aware of it. And that is where Control-Z becomes your best friend. Why? Because this undoes it very quickly and easily. That's the simplest way to undo a Quick Explore. It's very useful, but that's the way to undo it. This is much easier explained and seen through a demo that we will perform as follows. Okay, Quick Explore. We already have our pivot table created. So we're just hovering around, and notice that we have a little magnifying appearing here. Once we are exactly hovering over it, we notice it says Quick Explore, which is exactly what we were looking for. What if we move around? It moves around too. Well, let's go ahead and click on it and see what happens. Notice it's called a Quick Explore because you can drill further down into other items. While we don't have it properly configured or thought of, what if we want to go and find out what the employee or order number is? Let's choose and click. Notice it drill down automatically. You can keep on going, and it keeps on going. Notice it's telling you here on top the Quick Explore options that happened. First, we did Northwind Traders Almonds, and then we chose Customer ID 10. And if we wanted to go furthermore, it would show up here as it just did. We could take a different approach and attempt to go by category, and it keeps on adding. As mentioned before, your best friend becomes Control-Z. Why? Because if you want to undo it, Control-Z, Control-Z, and Control-Z. That is how you Quick Explore. Relationships. Relationships are definitely defined when you set a connection. Their types are usually one-to-many, many-to-many. Now, there is one particular one that is always problematic, no matter where you are. Power Pivot or your relational database, Access, and these are many-to-many. But these are not handled by Power Pivot. That doesn't mean that you can't create a workaround. It just means that they are not out of the box handled by it. So, one of the best ways to address that is talking to your database professional. Why? When you import your data, you notice that automatically it sets all your relationships. Therefore, they could find a way to create a middle table that can handle this type of relationship for you. That does not mean that you can't do it on your own. It just means it's going to be a lot more work for you to do it than having somebody else do it for you and having just to choose a connection and re-import it. Let's take a look at the relationships in a demo so that we can better understand what we just talked about. With our relationships, we're still in our workbook. Let's go and explore where we can modify these relationships, or even just take a look at them. Click on Power Pivot, click Manage. That takes us back into Power Pivot area, which we can click the Home, Design, and this is exactly what we're looking for. Let's take a look at the Manage Relationships. Notice these are already created for us. It's telling us that it's active. All three of these are active. and they exist between this table and this table. Order details is related to orders. Order details is also the order ID. The status ID is related to the status ID in order detail status. Order details, the column product ID, is related to products ID in the products table. You could modify them here, as you can see, indicate if it's active or not. You could delete if necessary, or create a new one. Why would you create a new one? We were talking about creating a workaround. What if you were able to obtain or create by your own, in your data model, a table, and you wanted to establish a relationship? This is where you would do it. You would indicate the table and the column, from and to, and how they relate to each other. What if you wanted to just look at the relationships in a different type of view? Let's go to Home. Explore where we could see this type of relationship and click Diagram View. This is where we would see. You could reorganize how things are displayed in this view too. Just because they're there doesn't mean that you can't rearrange them. After all, it's your workbook. You can rearrange the length. Notice the width. We're modifying this to be the center of attention. Order details, we could reduce the length a bit, just enough to have us understand better how things are working, and extend order details. Further down, and put it right at the center. This is a lot longer, so let's try to do the following. Put this one out of the way, and probably under this table, just to give us more real estate here. It's still not going to be enough, but this gives you a better idea of what you can do with your relationships. This is once again just the tip of the iceberg. Here you could display columns, your calculated fields, your hierarchies, and your KPIs. You can choose, hide them, and your calculated fields or columns as well. Notice, this is a very important one, of course. You don't want your relationships to be displaying without your columns in here. You're encouraged to play around and determine what is your best approach to making sense of how you're going to relate your data, and ultimately what makes better sense and common sense to you. Perspectives. You probably heard that in business intelligence terminology, and it's very similar to in Power Pivot. It's akin to a view, but applied to your data model. Why would you need them? It helps sometimes look at data from a specific point of view. Perspectives are much easier understood by taking a look at them in a demo. Perspectives, let's take a look at how we would do it step by step. We're already located on our pivot table here. Where we have to go is back into Power Pivot area. So we click on Manage, and we're looking for the Advanced tab. How do we know we're in the right place? Once you're in Advanced, you'll see Perspectives. Notice that you can create and manage them and select the default. Well, let's go ahead and create one and give it a prospective name. Notice that we can create one from multiple tables that exist already. That is very useful. So we can go ahead and choose a new perspective. Let's call it Order Details Quantities. For the sake of it, we're just going to choose our quantity, and we're going to choose from products our category and the product name. All we want is those columns itself. Notice that we can rename it here. We could also copy it and paste it into a new perspective and or delete it. For the moment, we're interested in seeing what happens when we create one, so let's just click OK. Notice, looks like not much happened here, did it? But if we click on Select, there we go. We have the quantity there. Now, what is happening here? You probably noticed, well, where are the other columns we selected? Yes, it's not playing nice. There are some pros and cons. Not to mention that this is usually applied only in the Power Pivot area. You cannot use it in your pivot table itself. So the limitations are there. We can go back in here, select it, create and manage it, and click on it. Now, what if we remove the previous columns in here? We're not going to use this one. We're just going to stick to products. And in products, we're going to use the description and the list price and minimum order quantity. Now that we've changed things a bit, let's go and rename it. It's no longer order details quantities. Call it products quantities and reordering. Product reorders. And click OK. Notice what happened. Things worked much better than last time. We have now our product name, our list price, and our category all listed there. As mentioned before, you can create many as you like, but the limitations are that we're not going to be able to see them and reuse them in our pivot table. So keep that in mind when you're using your perspectives. The name is pretty catchy. It should have caught your attention by now. And what are they? Well, they're filters. Much more visually appealing filters than the ones we've seen before. And we will see in a few moments why. They're easily connected or joined with other slices. So if you created one and they're related through a lookup table, you can create another one and have them interact all together. Now, a few things to keep in mind with slicers too. They should be cleared prior to being removed. Why? If you do not clear them, you're probably going to spend quite a bit of amount of time trying to figure out why your data is not looking exactly as it should. Why it seems to be filtered, but without having the slicer there, you would immediately think it's gone. No. Whatever you filter through a slicer should be cleared because it will remain there even if the slicer is not there anymore. That can be very confusing, and it's happened to me quite a few times, so it's one of those things that you should keep on your checklist when removing them. Clear it always to make sure that your data will be cleared and filtered appropriately. The next one is the types. Slicers can be connected, disconnected, and time-based. Now, connected, this means related. That's really what the term should be. When you have your lookups, the slicer will refer to your lookup relationship, and they'll be connected from your transaction to your lookup table. Now, the opposite happens when it's disconnected. You can have a transaction table that does not relate to any other one, and that's why they're called disconnected. And time is nothing else that you're using a slicer that it's based on time. They're very nice, and we'll see quite a few ways of how we can reuse them and use them connected with other slices as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at a demo so that we can enjoy using slicers. Slicers. Let's go ahead and explain how slicers can really be useful to us. We'll continue from where we started off last time, and we had a few items already created in our pivot table. Now, let's go ahead and ask, what else should we add in here? As a slicer, we need to have some quantifiable filters. Well, which could those be? If we look at order details, we can see that the category would be one good way, but it's not available in our order details. It's available only by scrolling down into our product table. Okay, here we go. We have one. We click on right side of it, and we see those previous filter existing before. That's great, but it doesn't look as nice as what we were promised, a slicer that's appealing. Let's go ahead into Power Pivot and the ribbon and click Analyze. Let's click a slicer, insert a slicer under Filters, and notice that we get another checkbox list here. Let's look and choose Category from Products by scrolling down and click OK. Okay, this is very different. We hadn't seen this before. Well, let's go ahead and add it in here. Notice one thing that happened immediately as I added the slicer. We had previous filters existing. Following our recommendation, let's go ahead and clear it. Noticing that nothing is selected in here, we can see that things are different now. Let's click on Baked Goods. See what happened there? That changed immediately. What about beverages? That's a different type of filtering. It's much more appealing to us. Nicer. We can move it around, stretch it. Notice that if we wanted to do this, we could. Of course, it might interfere, but we could do a few things in here. We could add more rows and put it on top. We can always still choose multiple ones, just holding Control and scrolling down. And notice, as soon as you let go of the Control key, you've added another category. Well, that's great. But we were talking about also time. How can we fit time into this equation? We have order details already existing. We have to look for a date that we can leverage in order to create another slicer. That definitely does not happen in order details. We see dates happening in the orders table. Let's go back into Analyze and insert a timeline. And notice one thing that happens. It already has an idea of what's happening with some dates. Let's choose ship date just for this matter to be a little bit more accurate. When a ship date happens, we know that it's been sold and that it's on its way. So that should be a little bit more accurate than just an order date. Let's click OK. Look at what happened. We're going to put it on top and extend this slicer. It already went in there and added for us the months that are available. Nice. So let's see what happens if I just want to see January. I click on January. It filtered already. How do I know it matches? Let's go ahead and add it to the pivot table as well. Scrolling down, adding ship date. It's telling us there's already a calculated data in there. Do you want to add it? Yeah. Let's go ahead. Oh, we did it in the wrong place. So let's go ahead and add it to the rows. And notice, indeed, it is from January. Let's see what happens if I do February. Well, that's great, but I'm just selecting 1 month at a time. I want to see a quarter. Let's choose by expanding it. Notice what happens. Now we have the quarter. We have January, February, and March. It's being summed, and let's go ahead and make this bold. We can even add a little bit of a filling factor in here, just to make it a little bit more attractive to the eye. And notice, we have already, it's telling us Q1. Well, let's make it for up the way to June. By letting go of the control, we did that. So notice, slicers are a bit more appealing than just the run-of-the-mill filters. They are connected. And how do we know that they're connected? Let's take a look and click on the options we have here. I'm right now selected the slicer itself. We have a few options available to us. First, the caption. We could extend it and say order details, ship date. Notice the name changed. Report connections. This is telling us it is connected to the pivot table on this sheet. And yes, the sheet is not the best name for it, sheet 2. Let's change that to order details, shipped dates. Let's go ahead and look at the styles. Let's select a different style. Maybe you want a different color. Notice that you can change them. Dark, a little bit oranger. You can do quite a few things in there. You can add, look at the header, remove the header, selection label, which tells you from which quarter it was starting, the time level, scroll bar. You can make it just change, make a few additions here and there, depending on what you're looking for. The height, I'm putting it backwards, should be. You have quite a few choices in there. Now, this applies also to any slicer. Just because I was choosing that one doesn't mean that it only applies to that. Look at this type of slicer. The colors, the connection, the same thing. We can give it a better naming. Name the product category. You can choose any of these colorings. And the same happens for the width and other options that are readily available for us. Now, I made some changes, which now, if I extend it back to the original value, it takes care of both Q1 and Q2 of 2006. That takes care of what would be considered slicers. Now, there's more choices that you can use by going into the properties and making them more appealing. Just depends on what type of colors. Maybe you have some corporate policy standards for slicers, Excel. Most importantly, the ones that apply to Excel most likely will apply to Power Pivot because, after all, Power Pivot is an add-in within Excel. Use those to your advantage and even go ahead and probably create one of your own. Drill through. This is a nice addition and functionality of Power Pivot itself. Why? Because you can take advantage and go see the details from within your Power Pivot table. That said, you're probably thinking, well, how does show details and drill through really mean the same? They don't, and that's very smart of you. You caught it right immediately. There is no drill through listed on the options. It's called actually show details, which once you click show details, takes you to a new worksheet. It creates a new worksheet for you. You're probably thinking, well, I already have that already with the Quick Explorer. Yes and no. They're very similar, but in this case, you can't undo with Control-Z. That said, let's go ahead and take a look at a demo with drill through. Drill through. We are already starting with a pivot table that we have previously created with slicers. Now, we still have some slicers values filled in. We can see here and here we're using the first 2 quarters. So if we click within the table, pivot table itself, we right click, we can look for drill down or up. We see quick explore, but we could easily hover over and see that outside of this menu, but we're not seeing any drill through or even show details. What are we doing or missing here? Let's go ahead and click in sum of quantity and right click in here. Notice that we do see show details here. What do you think is going to happen when we click on it? We get a message. Well, what did we do wrong? We actually didn't do anything wrong. What it's indicating to us is we have slicer information with filter data already filled in. So let's click OK and clear. One more reason to clear your filters when you're going to be not using them very much. Now that these are cleared, let's go ahead and click again, right click, and go to show details. Something happened there. First, notice that a sheet named sheet 4 or new sheet was created. It's telling us that it returned the data for sum of quantity Northwood Trainers elements, all of it for the first 1,000 rows. It's giving us each of the columns: ID, quantity, unit price, discount, allocated, and we can keep on moving to the right and see that they are all there. If we go back, we can easily do that again with another value. Show details. Another sheet is created and it gives us the details for that. That said, we have all our information that can be drilled through down here. That is how we would use drills. Now, could you go further down? That's really how things are set up for you. And we can even go ahead and do some more show details. It keeps on going. You can keep on listing them here, naming them appropriately. Maybe this would be quantities for actually details for ID 55, and we can look for the product itself and give it more detail. Inventory ID 108 and rename it appropriately. This gives you an idea how to use your drill throughs.